So just like you have good and bad energy, you have good and bad tired. And so there are things that make you get tired in the right way, where you feel like, boy, after this great, meaningful day of work or a wonderful time on vacation with family, you're busy all day and at the end, or even after a very intense exercise, there's this happy kind of depleted feeling. But then there is also this thing that can creep in, the bad tired, which is where you have these symptoms of depression that start coming in.
Before we get started, if you enjoy these episodes, you might want to check out more at optimwork.com. Our website offers unique content, tools, and exercises to help you thrive at work and beyond. We have an in-depth masterclass covering our entire theory of growth, daily recommendations for personalized advice, and a platform to help groups and organizations learn and practice optimal work together. You can get a free trial at optimwork.com. Now let's start the episode. Hey, this is Sharif here with another episode of the Optimal Work podcast, back with Dr. Kevin Majors. Kevin, it's great to be back here with you after a little summer break.
Yeah, this was quite the break. Thanks for having me back.
Of course, yeah. It was a long break, and we were wondering, okay, who are we going to bring back for the next season? But we landed on, Kevin, so we got to have him back.
Why change now?
Yeah, things have been going so well. So, but we did want to change the topic a little bit because actually in our rebroadcast we've been publishing on fear and anxiety, and that's been a big theme over the last couple of years. Obviously, being one of your areas of expertise. But I thought as we return, we could start with somewhat of a new theme, which is energy and tiredness. And specifically, we got a question on depression to kick off this new season. So, Kevin, what do you think? Can I read out this question here?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Okay. So this listener says, some of us struggle more with depression than anxiety. I find mood swings, in particular extended periods of feeling very blue, to be very difficult to navigate. What strategies would you recommend? I get how to flip anxiety into adrenaline, but how does one best respond to feelings of sadness, which are profoundly demotivating?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And what I like about this question is that he's, in a way, asking for what is the comparable thing in the way we just talk about things in optimal work to anxiety and adrenaline on the depressive end of the spectrum. Because in anxiety, you have this beautiful system of adrenaline that can have a good spin where it's excitement, it's all good energy, or it can have a kind of bad spin, which is anxiety, and which we don't think is bad because we know we can flip the bad into the good in a moment of training. And reframing is so crucial to being able to do that flip. So it's natural then that people would ask, is there anything like that for depression? It's like, what's the adrenaline equivalent when it comes to depression? And there is. And how do you flip it? And there are ways there is an equivalent, and there are ways of flipping it. And so that's what I'd like to kind of get more deeply into in this one. So to hear all about adenosine. So that's kind of I'd love for us to kind of give the optimal work approach to adenosine. Maybe it's good, though, that we just kind of define what the blues are, or depression, or these kind of this low energy state, because that makes, he mentioned feelings of sadness, which is certainly part of it, and feeling profoundly demotivated, because that's also another key part where it's hard to start new behaviors. Low energy is a key part of it, and social withdrawal is another one, a sense of despair, that just nothing is really worth it. Things are kind of futile. And so those are really the hallmarks of this kind of negative, tired state. We could call it a kind of bad tired.
And you've called it a phobia of tiredness, right, before?
Yeah, so we'll get into that. That's an important part of it. So just like you have good and bad energy, you have good and bad tired. And so there are things that make you get tired in the right way, where you feel like, boy, after this great, meaningful day of work or a wonderful time on vacation with family, you're busy all day and at the end, or even after a very intense exercise, Yeah, there's this happy kind of depleted feeling where you've been, with those you love, spending time on what you love doing, making the body healthy. All of that can give you this sense of there's progress in my life and I had great things today. And you get this good, tired feeling. And that would be the right way to end every day. Uh, but then there is also this thing that can creep in, the bad tired, which is where you have these symptoms of depression that start coming in. Now, interestingly, those things I was mentioning of, low energy, trouble starting new behaviors, social withdrawal, less enjoyment of things is another one, and sense of despair. There's a chemical that there's another thing that happens in there, which we'll eventually say is really important, which is heightened stress hormones. So high levels of cortisol. So it turns out that's really important. But this list that I just have been kind of reciting is actually from the rat literature. So this is how you study low mood in rats, but they exactly are reproduced in humans. So, and we have all the same things. And so, but interesting, you can measure each of those things I've been mentioning, in animal models also. So whether you're looking at animal models or human models, there is actually a difference between a good tired and a bad tired that is purely physiologic. And so that's what I'd like to eventually be able to get into. How do we distinguish these two types of tiredness?
That's great. Yeah, Kevin, and I mean, a few things, a few ideas. One is, let's see, with anxiety, we distinguish between anxiety and fear, and it seems
Hmm.
like, well, some people have, anxiety to like kind of a degree that needs clinical treatment, and I suppose with depression, there's a similar
Yes.
thing that some
Yep.
people need clinical treatment, other people just have it to a degree where it's, has an effect on their daily lives, but it wouldn't be
Yep.
considered like full depression. Is that how you think about it? That there's a continuum, it's by degrees?
That's right. And I used to think that anxiety was different than depression in that everyone has the experience of anxiety in some way in their life, but then not everyone has the experience of depression. I'm willing to change that view now because everyone has the experience of bad tired. And then depression is a particular serious and extreme form of that kind of bad tired. And one example of bad tired that speaks to me is, and anyone can try this at home. So if you are working around the house, start cleaning the bathroom. And as you're cleaning it, you're make sure that you get some progress, that you're really putting effort in, but then don't finish it. And then switch to something else in the house. Start doing that, make some progress. There's an investment in effort, but don't finish, and then do something else. If you keep flitting between tasks, not finishing them, you will very soon experience a brief transitory feeling of this bad tiredness. Or if you start like replying to emails, don't like start, crafting the reply after you carefully write an email, but don't finish it. And then open up another one and do the same and then open up another one. You would very soon start to get this depleted feeling. Yeah, and so we also experience it in any time in our work where um, the solution we were hoping for didn't materialize. And some problem is a little knottier than we thought it would be. And that deferral of being able to complete it leaves us with that same kind of feeling. So that can get amplified into two different states, and that's burnout and depression. And now, if we get into what's underlying this, we can actually distinguish that transitory feeling of futility from burnout, from depression. And everything depends on understanding this one molecule called adenosine. So maybe it's good that we can start talking about what is adenosine.
Yeah, let's get in.
Uh,
So what is it? How does
yeah.
it work? How does it get in your brain?
Yeah. So anytime your neurons or muscles or anything in your body is doing work, that work and for its energy means taking ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and then taking it, and you can break one of those phosphate bonds and it releases energy. And now you have just two phosphates. So it's ADP, adenosine diphosphate. If you were to break that down even more, would release another phosphate bond to get more energy from it. You have AMP, adenosine monophosphate. And if you take that last one away, you just have adenosine. All right. That adenosine then, you can see, is a byproduct of getting energy. And the more energy you're squeezing out of ATP, the more adenosine is left over. Right? So that adenosine ends up being put outside the cell, and so in your brain, it's called the ISF, the interstitial fluid. And ISF, you can measure adenosine levels, and your neurons have receptors for adenosine, and that tells the neuron how tired it is. You would not feel any tiredness if the adenosine in that fluid outside your neurons wasn't triggering the receptors. So when adenosine hits those receptors, it tells your neuron that you're tired. So as the concentrations build up in the course of a day, you're building up then tiredness. So when it comes to sleep, what we call sleep pressure is that force that gently pushes you into sleep is adenosine mediated. It's simply the effect of adenosine on your neurons, telling your neurons it's time to rest. Now, it's not that every time your neurons get energy, they have to go all the way down and produce adenosine. With mild levels of effort and mild energy, you can have enough time to go from ATP to ADP, and then you can actually replenish it back to ATP. So it's not that every single time you're going to go all the way to adenosine. So but it's true that with any kind of intense activity, you are going to have some adenosine that gets left over. Because somehow the recycling just wasn't efficient enough to keep it going. And so you end up then building adenosine in objectively measurable quantities in the area between your neurons, the fluid that's between neurons. And there's a special population of cells called astrocytes they're called glial cells, but they're support for neurons. And it's the astrocytes that actually take care of clearing away adenosine. And this is why we sleep. So a huge part of the reason why we sleep is that, especially when you're in slow wave sleep, the neurons shrink. So that fluid space between neurons can go 60% bigger. That means now, and you also start flushing, the astrocytes make sure that fluid is taken from your cerebrospinal fluid and then flushes in between the neurons. So we actually have the removal of adenosine and other byproducts like lactate and a number of other these kind of byproducts. They all get flushed away when you're sleeping. And that's the work of a drainage system in the brain that was just discovered like not that many years ago called the glymphatic system, which is managed by astrocytes. So it's just cool that astrocytes flush your neurons at night, getting rid of a lot of the adenosine. But in the daytime, when you're awake, those astrocytes will actually take up adenosine as well into themselves and turn it back into ATP. So they have an enzyme that can put the phosphates back. And so the astrocytes are helping you to maintain energy levels at a nice constant hum throughout the brain. And they do that by also taking up adenosine. So you can flush it or you can take it back up and recycle it.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so it sounds like with this picture, you have the production of adenosine, and then you have that getting cleared away at some rate. And if you're producing adenosine faster than you're clearing it out, then you have a problem. But if you can kind of bring those to an equilibrium, that's sustainable effort. Is that more or less what's going on so far?
Yeah. And in fact, it's ordinary that in the course of our day, we do have this intense burst of activity, a sprint of focus, let's say, a golden hour, where you are going to build up adenosine, but then you're also going to have a break, and those breaks will help you to take it back in. So there's this normal ebb and flow of adenosine levels as you go through the day. But you will generally always be somewhat increasing the baseline. Otherwise, you would just stay awake forever. So if you didn't have adenosine building up, you wouldn't need sleep. And There are some incredible people, famous people who don't need much sleep. They get by on 4 or 5, 6 hours. And we don't yet know if adenosine is really implicated, but it may be that these people are just really good at clearing adenosine and they don't need as much. But it's also cool to see, knowing now just what we laid out of how adenosine works and how astrocytes work, a lot of best practices can come into the fore. We can see now the power that they have. And so maybe it's good that we just go through, like, what are some of the ways you can, like, leverage this?
Also, Kevin, just to clarify, I mean, the tie-in with depression, I guess it's somewhat clear. Depression is, I guess maybe if you could just clarify, because depression can last for, weeks and months. And
Yep, depression is not caused by too much adenosine per se. So it's actually it's caused by when a person has an aversion to adenosine itself. So the tiredness itself is now a trigger for more negativity. And so, I think that we'll have to go in a deep dive into how adenosine can actually get tagged with dynorphin. Just like adrenaline, when it's tagged with dynorphin, you have anxiety. When adenosine gets tagged with dynorphin, you have depression. But that'll require some kind of deeper dive.
okay, so that'll be a future episode.
Exactly.
Before we continue, a brief message. If you're benefiting from these discussions, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe. Doing so helps us to reach more people. So you're not just learning, you're also helping others to discover a path of growth and flourishing. Thanks for your support.
Depression may or may not have too high a level of adenosine, actually. But burnout is a condition where there is, in fact, in a sense, too much adenosine happening. That's one of the objective causes. That, I think, it would be good for us to also have another deep dive into, to understand the special case of burnout. But here we're talking about ordinary tiredness and maybe more transitory feelings of futility. So it could be bad tired, but in a kind of minor way, not the serious cases of burnout and depression. In those more minor, where say you're frustrated and tired, or you're just exhausted from a good day of work, the morning is actually probably the most important time to be able to take care of your adenosine system. One good way of doing it is getting bright light. So 10 minutes of bright light that is in the first hour after waking will actually, what it does is it works on this one nucleus in your brain that connects to the part that releases noradrenaline. That release of noradrenaline you get with bright light will help your astrocytes to work better. So if you have any residual tiredness after sleeping, any residual adenosine in that interstitial space, that can actually help kickstart the taking up of it into the astrocytes. Another thing that does that in the same kind of way is intense exercise. And so we're often telling people it's a great thing if you could do 10 minutes of jogging with 3 30-second sprints. That outdoors would be a wonderful way of getting bright light and the benefits of exercise. Because the short bursts of sprints will also require and produce this kind of a surge of adrenaline, which will help your astrocytes again to be able to clear the adenosine better. There's also increased cerebral blood flow when you exercise, which helps to wash it better as well and clear it away. BDNF, through its own mechanisms, helps with adenosine clearance. So all these ways in which you're boosting the ability of the brain to clear out the remains of adenosine from the night's sleep.
Now, quick question about the morning, Kevin. So you're saying, bright light helps. I'm just wondering if there's any value in the timing here. I mean, if someone sleeps until 11 and their first, bright light is 11 p.m., the sun's in the sky, like, is there a value to having that, first time of bright light earlier in the day, closer to sunrise? Is there even value in like watching having, watching the sunrise where it's a different kind of light versus midday light?
Those are great questions. And I don't know exactly the how much is lost by getting the bright light too late. So I can get back to you on that. Yeah, but I think the normal assumption here is that one, you're getting up sometime after dawn, which in the north in the winter months can actually be that can be an issue. Where dawn comes later, and then you just do the best that you can. But that might be one of the reasons why it's a little harder to get energy right away in the day in the wintertime.
And why people there are more depressed in the winter, right? Like,
Exactly. Yeah. No, those things do. There could be relations there. Uh, but then you have the benefit in the north that if you were to right after doing your run, you take a cold shower, it's actually more powerful. so and the cold shower has effects like bright sunlight in stimulating that noradrenaline system. That's adrenaline in the brain itself. And that too then can do the same effect. So if you could get bright light in the morning and intense exercise with intervals and a cold shower, that would be a perfect trifecta as far as getting your brain geared up just from the adenosine perspective. Uh, the A couple other things that are more gentle than that, those are all ungentle. And they're working actually by kind of getting adrenaline in the brain moving. The more gentle one is to do coherent breathing. So 4-1-4-1. You breathe in for 4 seconds, pause for 1, out for 4 seconds, and pause for 1. To do that, feeling the sensation in the chest of the expanding and then relaxing of the chest as through the cycle of the breath. That activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which also can help with clearing away metabolites in the brain. So it seems to help with the cerebral blood flow. So it seems likely that the operation of this clearance system in the brain, the lymphatic system, is really heightened by parasympathetic activation. That might be why people do feel more alert and awake after prolonged meditation. So meditation that's done very well with that 4-1-4-1 breathing should leave you actually feeling more alert and awake. And this might be one way of doing it.
so Kevin, it's great to know that this breathing, which is exactly what we do, before our golden hours, is going to help with this clearing process. So that means, if I'm right, that we're going to be restoring our energy throughout the day, right?
Yeah, so I think that you can see that these good practices, having good pauses, turning on parasympathetics, do help the brain in a real way to flush out more of the metabolites and aid this process of helping your astrocytes to take up and recycle the adenosine. Just to mention then a few other things real quick as we're approaching here at the end. Because so much depends on the drainage in the brain being able to clear away things. That's one good reason not to be dehydrated and why dehydration is hard on the brain. If you're dehydrated, you will likely feel more tired. And people can get a boost of alertness just from being well hydrated during the course of the day. Another important thing is micronutrients. Probably there are several that are important. Some of the B vitamins, B6, B12, folate. But maybe the most important is magnesium. There are estimates that like 50 to 70% of Americans are deficient in magnesium. But one of the big things we need magnesium for is to fuel a kind of whole category of enzymes called kinases. But adenosine kinase is how you clear adenosine and bring it back into ATP eventually. That requires magnesium. So if you're magnesium deficient, you're going to have a harder time doing that. And then the last thing is there are two kinds of, psychoactive, you could almost say, they're nutrients, are they? Well, one's a nutrient and one's essentially a drug. And this is creatine and caffeine. Okay, creatine works in the brain and in the body by supplying essentially phosphate groups to replenish ADP into ATP without requiring much energy. So it gives your cells, including the neurons in your brain, an easy, cheap way of getting ADP back to ATP. And if you keep doing that, you don't build up adenosine. So creatine works by preventing the accumulation of adenosine in the first place. And there are suggestions that the normal dose is 3 to 5 grams a day and taken in the morning. Maybe some people say 10 grams is needed for it to actually get past the muscles, which are hungry for creatine, and so it goes into the brain. There are human studies showing that if you're very sleep deprived one night, 20 grams of creatine can restore your performance and decrease the subjective feelings of tiredness. Although you might have to divide it in some doses or take it with food so it doesn't upset your stomach. Anyway, creatine is incredible.
Yeah. Well, I think the weightlifters will be happy to, creatine is so big. And, I know from my weightlifting days, a lot of, people ask me, what do you think of creatine? Is creatine okay? So it's good to know that it has your stamp of approval here.
Yeah,
and that it
creatine
has
is
these other
fascinating.
benefits.
Yeah, and now it's emerging actually as in its own right, a treatment for depression. But we'll talk more about that later. But it's through exactly this adenosine pathway. And then there's caffeine. Caffeine is the most actively taken substance that affects the brain in the world. It's a multi-billion dollar industry. Some estimate maybe $340 billion industry in the US alone. That seems like a lot, but all of caffeine's effects are from one mechanism. It blocks adenosine from hitting the receptor. That's it. So this is actually what got me interested in adenosine, because I thought that it was a phosphodiesterase inhibitor, which is a different kind of thing. It turns out that that's not how it works. So it works at physiologic doses entirely as an adenosine blocker. But yet it has all of these proven benefits for cognitive abilities. So your alertness, of course, is increasing, your wakefulness, but your motor performance is better, your memory performance is better, your mood and confidence are higher with caffeine. So it has all of these incredible effects, but it's purely by blocking adenosine. Caffeine does not actually reduce adenosine. Creatine does that, but caffeine does not. But caffeine can make it feel like you have less adenosine. And so it's not a solution in the long run, because adenosine can still be building up. And we do need to make sure we're doing all the healthy things to clear it. But caffeine sure can help in the short run. And there's probably not that much tolerance if you take a fixed amount every day. So caffeine can also be part of a healthy brain diet.
Well, Kevin, we're closing in here, but I kind of have one question. But I think you kind of gestured at this, that we'll continue this discussion in the next episode, and I have a feeling this touches on the substance of what you want to address next week. But I guess the question is, with caffeine, you're talking about blocking adenosine, and you've been talking about clearing adenosine. But earlier you had alluded to the fact that depression is less about adenosine and how much there is, and it's more about the frame that you give to it. And similarly with adrenaline and anxiety, anxiety is adrenaline with a negative frame. So you don't want to necessarily get rid of the adrenaline. Actually, we tell people, don't try to calm yourself down. Don't try to get rid of the adrenaline. So I guess my question here is, with say caffeine, or that's blocking adenosine, or these things clearing out adenosine, is that like trying to reduce your adrenaline, calm yourself down in the case of anxiety, whereas we should be focusing on the way we frame the adenosine? So I guess however much you want to say now, and then we can get more of that next week.
That gets to the central thing, which is a person willing or unwilling to experience adenosine? If a person were fully willing to experience it, they could still want the benefits that come from blocking the receptor, because they want to work better. It turns out that what's going to make the biggest difference between good tiredness and bad tiredness is the way you're working. So, but that's why probably we need to go into that in the next session.
Wonderful. Okay, Kevin, we'll be back next week to cover that great question.
All right. Thanks, Sharif.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and you're looking for more in-depth guidance, check out optimwork.com, our unique platform that delivers content, tools, and exercises to help you thrive at work and beyond.